Our first guest tonight is Philip Comella. Philip is a lawyer, visionary futurist, and host of the popular radio show Conversations Beyond Science and Religion. The podcast can be found at webtalkradio.net. His book, The Collapse of Materialism, Visions of Science, Dreams of Gods, is a culmination of decades of work committed to developing a new, incredible scientific paradigm to unify the physical world of science with the metaphysics of religion. He lives with his wife and daughter in Glen Ellen, Illinois. His website is thecollapseofmaterialism.com. Without any further delay, let's get him on the line. Philip, good evening. Welcome to AM 630 and the Fringe Radio Show.
Hi there. It's great being here, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great having you, and I am a Chicago native, so I guess I have to ask you, how is the weather back there in Chicago?
Well, we actually managed to rain out the Taste of Chicago, which is, you may know, is a big eating and music festival, so it poured down rain, and apparently they did not want to repeat Woodstock and have a bunch of young kids waddling around in the mud, so they canceled the festival. So, in other words, we've had a very wet day.
Wow, and then I'm a far south sider. I lived there for 30-some years and moved here to Utah about 20 years ago. But in talking to my mom, who still lives back there, they said, you guys get somewhat of like a polar vortex coming through again next week? Highs in the 50s?
Yeah, I've not heard of that, but I would not be surprised. There's, just like anything else, you just got to roll with it.
Yeah.
Anybody that it amazes me. People during the winter here, they're surprised that it's cold. Well, that's Chicago for you. So
exactly,
you just have to deal with it and buy the right clothing.
Exactly, Philip, without a doubt. Anyway, well, again, it's an honor to have you on the show tonight. And how did you, I guess, to start out, to give our listeners a little bit of a little bit of your backstory? You're an attorney. How did you come to writing this book? How did this all come together for you?
Well, I was a philosophy major in college, and we all have our own visions or purposes, and I've always had this deep-seated desire to figure things out. Maybe it's been a curse, but in any event, I've had this deep-seated desire to figure things out, what we're doing here, and to try to reconcile, to a bigger picture, to try to reconcile science and religion. I could never figure out why these two fields are battling each other or on different sides of the ring, so to speak, because there is one world. There should be one way to look at it. And so I started researching this in college. I went through the leading philosophers, and I thought that I had a way to figure it out. I started writing a paper in college. I didn't know enough to finish it. I got an incomplete in that course. And this book, The Collapse of Materialism, is really the culmination of all the research that I've done over the past 30-plus years to put the picture together.
Now, when we talk about, just at a high level, and I'd like to get into all the details, when we talk about science and religion, Philip, is there another piece that also kind of goes in there with, how can I say, we talk about science, which is trying to find the facts. Religion, of course, is kind of an interpretation. It's a history book. Some people, it's a guidebook. It defines. There are so many different religions, whether it's Judaism, whether it's being a Latter-day Saint, whatever it may be. But then there's actually kind of creation, or the spiritual world, if you will. Does the book kind of just encompass all of this as far as where you feel we came from, where we're going, how it all kind of fits together? Yes, that's the whole point. The point is that science right now is based upon a model called materialism, and we may not know it because a lot of people don't sit back and ponder the nature of the scientific worldview or paradigm. But the fact of the matter is that we are looking at the world through the lens of materialism, which means that materialism separates spirit or our inner states from the world, that the ultimate reality is matter, is stuff,
that when you break down matter, you will find the quote-unquote God particle, and that there's no purpose to the world. And, of course, a true materialist cannot believe in spirit, cannot believe in the paranormal, the supernormal, or anything that is really fun when you think about it.
Right, right.
So the idea here is to let's clean the slate. Let's try to be as objective as we can be. Let's look at human experience, anywhere from dreams and hallucinations to life after death, precognitive dreams, the placebo effect, quantum theory, evolution, all these things. Let's see if we could put all of human experience into one worldview instead of doing what modern science does, which is to say, if it doesn't fit their model, it can't be true.
Right.
And so that's really, and I think, there's other people going down this path, but what I'm trying to do is break the log jam and say, if you really want a complete scientific theory, you got to give up materialism. You got to give up the notion that matter is the only thing that's real.
When you talk about materialism in your book, Philip, and just kind of in this conversation in general, materialism, do you define that kind of as humans? It's human materialistic things. How do you define materialism, I guess?
Well, it's true. Materialism has a connotation in economics, okay, where people are materialistic and all they care about are things, big houses, cars, and boats, and money. That's not really what I'm talking about, although materialistic economics can be said to be connected to materialism. What I mean is the world as a machine model. Materialism is a matter-first model, that the world, that creation comes at us from the Big Bang. Consciousness arose from matter, that spirit is not real. If anything, spirit or consciousness in the materialistic worldview, it emerged from matter. Okay. So the key thing with materialism is that the world under this view is a self-operating machine, that all that is real is matter, is stuff, and that we can't control it. We can't control our bodies. We can't control mind. There can't be mind over matter. There cannot be a God. There cannot be spiritual experiences. So I'm talking about the big picture, the materialistic world model, which all modern leading scientists are following because they think it's necessary. It's a necessary model to practice science. So I'm saying it's not a necessary model. You need to take that model down and replace it with something that's going to explain more.
Where do you think, Philip, life started from? Do you? I got a whole bunch of questions and stuff, and we got a bunch of questions sent in for you to run by you tonight. But where do you think life became from? Do you think life started? A lot of people feel that the essence, the energy of us as human beings has existed for millions of years. Being human, we're just at a stopping point in life. This is just a milestone of the journey. We pass away as humans. We move on to the next step. Do you believe in that, or do you feel that it's something similar to that, or what's your take on it?
Okay. Well, first of all, let's just say that right now there are two leading models of how life began. Okay. And then I'm going to tell you what my model is.
Okay.
The first model is the Darwinian model, where Darwin thought, and he wrote this letter that modern science has picked up on, that life arose from a swamp, that somehow, and I'm not making this up, that somehow a bunch of chemicals randomly combined together to form something that looked like a DNA molecule. And that molecule started replicating itself and evolved from simple bacteria into the human being and the diversity of life. Okay, so that's the materialistic model. And notice that it says that chemicals come first. The the chemicals combine to form life. If you ask them how did that happen, they really don't know. The second theory is from the book of Genesis, which is really, to put it simple, God did it. Okay, God created life. What I'm saying is that that we are living in the dream of God, that we are the mind of God coming to the realization that we are dreaming the world. And therefore, life is, in my mind, a vehicle, the best vehicle to carry out the process of living. That we are forms, these are the best forms that the mind could conceive of to carry out the process of life. And so I think that life came from the mind of God. And in that sense, it's similar to religion, except we know dreams are possible. In the standard Genesis account, it's a miracle because we think that the God in the heaven, pointed his finger and created man and women. But I'm saying we don't need that type of miracle. We know that dreams are possible. So to answer your question, I think that life came from the mind of God, that we are spirits in a spiritual world.
Do you feel that the existence that we're in right now, Philip, the existence that we're in is sort of maybe a simulation, if you will, or a hologram of sorts?
Well, it's the same thing as saying when you dream at night, or when you have a vivid hallucination, if you had one or listeners have had one, in that moment, the mind is creating a real seeming world from nothing, from the base of the self, from the unconsciousness, a process, in my opinion, that we'll never understand, but it's a miracle that has been given to us somehow, that the mind can dream. I call the worldview in my book, The Collapse of Materialism, I call it the real dream worldview. And I call it the real dream worldview is because our bodies are as real as the natural world. We are dreamers in a dream world. We are spirits in a spiritual world. The world is real to us. There is no other reality. In fact, we have nothing else to compare this reality to other than our dreams at night. So the answer is this is not, you could call it a simulation, but it's not a simulation of anything. It's as real as worlds get. The world doesn't change under my view of the world. We just look at it differently. We look at it as a holistic creation from the mind of God, as opposed to a collection of robots that are off on their own little quests to understand the world or to build their own castles. What I'm saying is that we are united at the core. We are God in a work in progress, trying to understand itself. And so, therefore, this is as real as it gets. And it's the same, it carries over to everything. In other words, things like telepathy. Why can't two minds talk to each other, assuming you believe in telepathy? Well, it would make perfect sense if we had the same mind.
Right.
And so even though, the holographic principle is a good metaphor, and I'm actually writing an article on that, but the hologram, we are hologram creators, because when we dream at night, we're creating a hologram. You think about it. We are projecting it out of ourselves. So we don't need the mirrors and the lasers to create a hologram. We have the natural ability to dream.
Do you this is pretty deep, man.
Well, the thing is that you've got to start from ground zero and build it up. At the end of the day, each of us has to decide what we believe in. And most people, I think, a lot of people go to the default viewpoint, which is what the religious leaders say and what the science professors say. We don't question the big beliefs. What I'm saying is take a time out, question those beliefs, for a day or two and see if there's a different way to view this. My book, it took a long time because I want to put the whole story together. So someone could just read this book, and there is a different way to look at it. If you don't want to look at it that way, fine. But at least here is a whole other way of looking at the world. And in my opinion, what I'm trying to do is be more logical than science, more authoritative, and much more optimistic. If you could be more logical and wind up in a much more promising world, then why don't you go down that path? So you're right. It is deep, but I think it's also important.
Well, do you feel, Philip, that in doing this radio show and talking, and talking about all these what we'll call fringe subjects, things that are, some people say, oh, fringe, you're talking about wild and crazy stuff. To me, fringe is, I define fringe is stuff that's just a little bit different. It's a little bit out on the edge. It's something you have to go to, whatever the subject may be, and be willing to delve into it a little bit. But I believe, and I'd like to get your take on it, that people, I think, are just now starting to be a little bit more open-minded about these types of things. Years back you've been studying this for such a long time, but probably 20 years ago to write the book, things have come a long way. We've got a long way to go, but I believe, and like to get your take, if you think people are being a little bit more accepting to books and studies like this.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, Pat, and I think that's a great observation, because if you look back 20, 30 years ago, if you go to the the New Age section of the bookstore, there wasn't very many books there. There was the Tao of Physics, the Dancing Lulu Masters, and the Celestine Prophecy came out, and there was a gradual increase in the number of books, and now there's more and more people who are using, for example, quantum theory to try to explain psychic phenomena or life after death. There are people trying to make more and more people making connections between Eastern mysticism and science, and there's a gradual opening of the mind. And I think you're exactly right that 20, 30 years ago, I would have been more radical than even I'm sounding now, but I think the time is right, and this is a function. When you think about it, it's a function of us sort of becoming more open-minded, of more and more people thinking for themselves. Because all I could really ask is for people to think for themselves and consider a mind-first worldview. And this is not completely original. In the 16th and 17th century, their idealist philosophers or mind-first philosophers, those who thought that the world was mind-created, were part of the mainstream. It was only when Newton came up with his mechanical picture of the universe, and where math started describing the physical world, that materialism started dominating the way we look at the world. But we forgot that idealism was always out there as being something that was never completely refuted. Bishop Berkeley and David Hume and Immanuel Kant, some great thinkers, and even Descartes, they really gave a lot of power to the mind. And so I'm sort of updating this whole idealist notion and trying to make it real for our modern world. That's really what I'm trying to do.
I've got some questions that were sent in for you. Can I go ahead and fire a few at you?
Sure.
Carol writes in from California. She says, Philip, in the August issue of the Scientific American, the cover article is "The Black Hole at the Beginning of Time. Do we live in a holographic mirage from another dimension?" She wants to know what your take is on that, and if you were aware of that research.
Well, that's sort of a synchronicity right there, because I'm actually writing an article, a blog, today, on comparing the holographic principle from science from Scientific American to what I've been talking about. Okay, Now notice here the difference between what I have been saying and what Scientific American is saying. Scientific American, to put it simply, is saying that there are a bunch of physicists who are theorizing that perhaps the information buried in a black hole has somehow created the three-dimensional world we live in, okay? Which to me sounds pretty radical, okay? But the key thing is that they believe the hologram was created way out in space and is coming at us. That we're part of this hologram that's coming at us. What I'm saying, we're part of a hologram-like creation that's coming from us. That's the only difference. But there's a big difference in the way you view such a world. We know that dreams are possible. We know that our minds are capable of conjuring up a holographic-like world. So I think the mind-first hologram is a lot more scientific and a lot more provable than the black hole one. Okay? Also, if it's coming from us, wouldn't we have more responsibility for that? Wouldn't we care more about it? Wouldn't we feel part of that world more than if it just happened to come from this black hole? So I have given a lot of thought to that. I think it's ironic that modern science has a bunch of theorists that are imagining a holographic universe coming from a black hole when we know that we can create such a world ourselves.
And here's what I'm trying to wrap around a little bit, and just to get your thoughts on this and your take on it. Do you believe that when we start talking about, if we want to call it dream states, or if we want to talk about, holographs or simulations or what have you, how do you define, Philip, how do I put this the right way? Material things, solid things, things that we have, cars, trucks, buildings, and what have you. Do you believe that these, we've truly built these things? Some people say, I'm sitting in this radio station here in the studio doing this show, and this is just kind of a hologram that I'm seeing, but yet I know I got a hard desk in front of me that's got oak underneath it. How do you kind of bring that, if you want to call it real things, solid physical things, and dreams, if you will? You know what I'm trying to say? How do you kind of interconnect that all together? I just can't come up with the right words, and I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, there's two things here. That's a good question. There's two things. First of all, in a dream, the world always appears real to the dreamer. That's the whole point. A dreamer is always fooled by the reality of his or her dream. You always think it's real. Now, so that's one point. Remember, there is no difference, in my opinion, there's no difference between a dream and the dreamer at night and our current world. It's a matter of degree. Now let me respond to this point about the world being appearing so solid. It's the same answer, but let me give you a different way to look at it.
Okay.
When you sit at your desk and you use your hand, you pound that table. Well, that table is really solid. How can you possibly tell me that that's an illusion? Are you telling me that I'm hallucinating that table? Look how hard it is. Well, you just used your hand, which is part of the spiritual world, part of the dream, to disprove the dream. That's impossible. The spiritual world is going to be real to spirit, just like a dream is real to the dreamer. See? That they cancel out. So we are spirits in the spiritual world. It seems real to us because we are spirits. We are part of that world. We just haven't understood it enough. Remember something. This is going to a very important question here. Under the current scientific model, they have to have the entire universe of stars coming from nothing. We all, throughout, at some point of our lives, haven't you scratched your head and said, where did all this stuff come from? Okay? And if you ask the scientists who promote the Big Bang, well, they say we can't answer that question because it came before time, or we just assumed that it came from nothing, or it was all singularity. They don't answer the question. Why? Because there's just the question of how something came from nothing. We know that in dreams our mind is capable of conjuring up the appearance of something from nothing. We know that's possible. And so all we've done is we've forgotten that we are part of the spiritual world. So that's it. Just you have to sort of think about it, but after some time you realize it starts making sense because our bodies are part of the quote unquote illusion. The illusions they cancel out. There's a passage in Siddhartha, the book by Hermann Hesse, where Siddhartha says exactly the same thing to his student. His student says, "Well, Siddhartha, if the world's an illusion, doesn't that bother you? You know, what is it? What is it? You know, where's reality?" And Siddhartha says something like, "Well, if the world is an illusion, then so am I, and it doesn't make any difference."
Right.
So that's the answer. You have to think about it, but that to me is one of the steps that you've got to get to understand what I'm calling the real dream worldview. It's as real as it's going to get.
What about when we go to now? Let's kind of, in our day-to-day lives, of course, we go to work, we come home, we spend time with our families, we go to bed. That dream, those dream states that we experience, Philip, at night,
right.
And they can be crazy, they can be all over the place. Where does that fit into the picture?
Well, it makes perfect sense. Just imagine it this way, okay? Look up at the sky, and let's say you have 1,000 people at a concert, and they look up at the sky. Under the current worldview, the way we look at that, we say that, well, there is one sky separated from these people. These are all separate people, separate brains. There's one sky above it that's independent of all those people. What I'm saying is the reason we see the same sky is because we're participating in the same dream. We have the same mind. We are unfolding, part of the unfolding dream of God. So therefore, the force of the united mind, the mind of God, is a lot more powerful. Our dreams at night are like drops in the ocean. We are dreaming creatures at our core. See, what I do in the book is I say, if you add our innate dreaming power to the forces of nature, the four forces of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and nuclear weak force, we could explain everything, but you've got to add the dreaming power. We are dreaming creatures. So at night, we're sort of like our little dreaming power, we go off in these little tangents, our little dreams. But during the day, we unite at our unconscious level to create the public world.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fringe Radio Show. Philip, again, thank you so much for giving us some time on your weekend.
Oh, well, thanks a lot for having me. It's, having a good time. Thank you.
We are learning a lot, that's for sure, and learning to think deeply, man.
Yeah, well, it's up. I wish there was an easier way to do it. On the other hand, I look at it like if you're going to fly an airplane, for example, it's always good to read the instruction manual. And I think that during life, at some point, you sort of have to look at some of the big questions and try to figure out what the instruction manual is. And so that's really what this is. It's as Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So I think that it's deep, but it's important. And you know what? It helps you think for yourself.
Right.
Because so many times we let others make the big decisions for us, and then we realize, wow, I wish I would have thought that through myself. So.
What's your take on religions? I just like to get your view on it. Myself, I was raised again as a Chicago Catholic. I went to a Catholic grammar school, Catholic high school. My family, it came down from generations. My mom's an old world Italian. And to me, religion, I think it gives a lot of people a sense of order, But yet, I feel like with the Bible and so many other books that have been written through history, I personally feel that it's all interpretation and how an individual interprets these things. What's your take on religion?
Well, I was also raised as a Catholic, and a lot of what you said is similar to my upbringing. I think that science has to change their model, like we've been discussing. I think they have to change the model of materialism or a mind-first worldview. The issue with religion for me is that I think that religion is sort of a snapshot of people's understanding of God in history, that our notion of God has to evolve. And in fact, our notion of God has evolved. If you look at, for example, the Bible or the Koran being two examples, in each example, the words are inspired, that they were handed down by God, or Muhammad was the medium through which God told Muhammad to recite, and he wrote the Koran. And very similar with Moses, with the Old Testament. But when you think about it, those folks back then, if you assume that a lot of what they were saying was true and honest, what they're doing is they are articulating an image of God that's thousands of years old. So I think our understanding of God has to evolve, and it is evolving. More and more people are looking to Eastern religions, yoga, meditation, Buddhism. There's more and more people walking away from Orthodox religion. There's more and more people saying that they're spiritual but not religious. So we have people questioning those beliefs, because I think that if you update our image of God, we could start making some of the optimism, some of the visions of religion become actually true. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to say, hey guys, if you stop projecting God outside of you, up in the heavens or on the cross or whatever, if you stop projecting it outside of you, if you see it as coming from us, then we could really make a heaven on earth. We could really make some of those dreams come true. So I think that we have to, just like you got to question science, which may be more difficult, I think you got to question religion. But what I see, Pat, is that people tend to naturally question religion.
Right.
Because it's such a personal issue, as opposed to science, where a lot of us just take on faith what we're told on the TVs or in science magazines. So that's my spin on religion. Gotcha.
I've got quite a few questions sent in for you today, but let me go ahead and get a couple of these out and get your take on it. It says Billy from upstate New York writes and says, Philip, what are your thoughts on the soul and the spiritual connection to this holographic dream state as far as communicating with our divine guides?
Okay, well, in the simple picture, I'm trying to be scientific. Okay, so the simplest thing I could say in the beginning is that the visible external world, what we call nature and the universe, is a reflection of internal states. We are connected to the world, so our soul is poured out into the world. Okay? Now, with regard to divine guides or spiritual mediums and this kind of thing, it's possible. In my view of the world, these things become possible. Okay? And there would be a connection. So, but the most important thing is, for me, is making this real. Okay? I'm not talking about a fantasy world. I'm talking about this is the real world we're in. But what it does is that it opens up the doors. So if people have a quote-unquote guardian angel, or if they've had an out-of-body experience, or if they have what other quote-unquote fringe beliefs, they don't have to think that they're crazy.
Okay.
Because these things are possible in a dream world. It's just that we want to live in an ordered world. See, David Hume said this. We have a need for organization, and so we want to live in a tightly regular, constant world. So these things are possible, and that's the beauty of it. That you could feel as if that we live in an enchanted world, and there might be more than meets the eye.
Gotcha. Another question for you is God creating the universe through his creative dream state, which we are all a product of, and what would you call all of the catastrophic events witnessed by scientists through telescopes, for example, supernovas? Is God having a nightmare of sorts?
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Well, first of all, that's pretty close. But I thought the question was going to be about why does evil exist.
Okay.
But I'm not. But because the question that was not the question, I'm not going to answer that one. But I can. But we live in an amazing universe. We live in a world bustling with energy, with exploding supernova, with comets and meteors and natural wonders. The world is alive. So in this new vision, science still is practice. We still investigate the far reaches of the cosmos. We still look at outer space. We still look deep in the oceans and at nature. But what we're viewing is the miracle of God's creation, which, by the way, is not all that radical, because a lot of people do think the world is God's creation. I'm just saying that there is actually a real scientific way to prove it, because we know that dreams are possible, and so we need to get connected to it and make it real. So the world stays the same, except I think there's more wonder, more room for wonder, because we realize that we are part of a miracle in progress.
Very interesting. Very well put. Evil, and that's something we've got an NBC News break coming up in just a little bit. Not right now, but in a little while. Can we keep you for another go-around tonight? Okay, because we got a lot of questions sent in. Let's talk about evil a little bit.
Right.
Why does it need to be there? Why does it need to be there?
Well, the problem with evil is a lot more easy to understand when you consider that we are part of God. And humankind has misunderstood its own nature and its connection to God. We have fought over our places in line in front of God. We have fought over images of God, territory. We have fought wars because we've misunderstood who we are. And so imagine if the notion that we lived in a dream of that our world is that we are part of a dream of God. Imagine if that was accepted as valid as the law of gravity. Now we start laying down a basis for peace. And so the problem of evil is that because we are the only God, we have created evil because we've misunderstood who we are. So they thought they were superior.
Right.
Superior, so they thought they could wipe out, an entire people because they were inferior and for other reasons. I mean, it goes throughout history.
You're cutting out a little bit, Philip.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem.
So that's it. So it's all because it's the same thing. I mean, we could talk about the Middle East between Palestine and Israel and the Israelites. They misunderstand, in my opinion, that they're all part of mankind. They're equal before. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but that to me is the problem. We've misunderstood who we are.
And again, a comment somebody sent in said, Philip speaks of our desire for order, but there are so many of us who are comfortable with disorder.
Well, the kind of order I'm talking about is the kind of order that we see in nature. I'm talking about a very deep order. I'm talking about the regularity of the laws of nature. I'm talking about the fact that the Earth goes around the sun once every 364 and a half days or so, and the way that it rains and the flowers bloom and there's blossoms and we could count on the laws of gravity being constant. I'm talking about order on a very deep level. Right. I'm not talking about can you live with a little, I mean, my office is balanced between chaos and order right now. So I know all about this order.
Part of the human experience, without a doubt.
Yeah, I know. As much as I try, somehow things continue to get jumbled up. What can I say?
Okay, here's a big one for you that somebody sent in.
Yeah, well, the other ones are pretty easy going, so
we'll keep drilling in deeper.
Okay.
Where do you believe that God comes from, or how did it all start? Where did God come from? Where did he or she or it wake up from?
Okay, this is something that you really got to think about and meditate and close your eyes and ponder, because I think we could explain almost everything in human experience if we look at the world as the dream of God. But one thing we will never be able to explain is where did the dream come from? How are dreams possible? Why is it that rather than being in a black void, nothing, we are living in this incredibly miraculous world? That question, how are dreams possible, is to me the source of religion, the source of the religious sediment. So to me it brings it all home. That question cannot be answered, but it's our responsibility to take this miracle and do the best we can with it to build a better world. I think the last chapter or two of my book is called The Guardians of the Dream. We are responsible. We are guarding this miracle. We'll never know that answer. That's the beauty of where we're at.